I stand at the mailbox holding two identical white envelopes. One contains my wedding invitation to my parents. The other contains legal documents demanding repayment for 28 years of emotional and financial neglect. My hands shake as I debate which envelope to mail. My fiancé, Marcus, warned me this was too risky. But my parents don't know I discovered the truth about my childhood. They don't know about the trust fund my grandmother left that they spent. They don't know I hired a lawyer. I drop both envelopes in the mail slot and walk away. Growing up in suburban Connecticut, I thought I was just like any other kid. My name is Yvonne, and for most of my childhood, I believed my parents, Gerald and Diane, were hard-working real estate agents who sacrificed everything to give me a decent life. That belief shaped who I became, how I saw the world, and how I judged my own worth. From the time I was 5 years old, I remember being alone, not just for an hour or two after school, but for entire evenings, sometimes whole weekends. My parents would leave before dawn and return after dark. Their faces tired, their voices clipped with exhaustion. They told me they were showing houses, meeting clients, building their business so I could have opportunities they never had. I believed them. I had to. By age 7, I was making my own meals. Peanut butter sandwiches became my specialty, though I got creative with cereal combinations when we ran low on bread. I walked myself to school starting in 2nd grade, a 20-minute trek through our neighborhood that I made alone while other kids were dropped off by parents in minivans. I told myself this was making me independent, strong, capable. My teachers never questioned it. In a suburban town where everyone seemed busy, a self-sufficient child didn't raise red flags. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly woman who lived next door, became my unofficial guardian. She was in her 70s, widowed, with grown children who rarely visited. She would see me sitting on our porch steps at 6 in the evening, still in my school clothes, waiting for my parents to come home. She started inviting me over for dinner. Meatloaf on Mondays, chicken casserole on Wednesdays, pot roast on Fridays. I remember the warmth of her kitchen, the way she'd ask about my day, help me with homework at her dining table. She never asked where my parents were. She just filled the gap they left. I wore clothes from thrift stores while my classmates showed up in fresh outfits from the mall. I told myself it didn't matter, that material things were superficial, but I remember the sting of being excluded from birthday parties, the embarrassment of showing up to school picture day in a faded sweater with a small hole near the hem. My parents said we couldn't afford better. I believed them because why would they lie? Birthdays were particularly painful. My parents rarely attended my school celebrations. Instead, they'd send store-bought cupcakes with generic frosting, the kind you grab from the supermarket bakery section. Other kids had parents who took the day off work, who brought homemade treats, who stayed for the party and took photos. Mine sent baked goods as a placeholder for their presents. I learned to smile through it, to pretend it didn't hurt. High school brought new challenges. While my friends got allowances and part-time jobs for spending money, I worked out of necessity. Sally's Diner on Main Street hired me at 15 to bus tables and wash dishes. I worked every weekend, most weeknights, saving every dollar for a future I knew I'd have to fund myself. My parents made it clear that college would be my responsibility. They couldn't help. The business was struggling, they said. Money was tight. Every penny went to keeping a roof over our heads. I believed them. I got scholarships, filled out financial aid forms, took out student loans that would haunt me for years. I worked 2 jobs through university while pursuing my nursing degree, sleeping 4 or 5 hours a night, surviving on coffee and determination. My parents visited campus once in 4 years. Just once, they stayed for 2 hours, took me to lunch at a chain restaurant, then drove home because they had an important client meeting the next morning. I graduated with my nursing degree and $30,000 in debt. My parents didn't attend the ceremony. Too busy, they said. They sent a card with $50 inside and a note that said, "Proud of you." I cried reading it. Not from joy, but from a loneliness so deep it felt like drowning. Throughout my 20s, I built a life. I worked at Hartford General Hospital, made friends, dated occasionally, slowly paid down my loans. My parents and I spoke maybe once a month, brief phone calls where they asked surface-level questions and I gave surface-level answers. I'd visit them twice a year, awkward dinners where we ran out of conversation after 30 minutes. I told myself this was normal, that families grew apart, that adult relationships with parents were supposed to be distant. Then, 3 months ago, everything shattered. I received a call from a lawyer named Bernard Fletcher. My maternal grandmother, Dorothy, had passed away at 89. I hadn't seen her since I was 9 years old. My parents told me Shed gotten too ill for visits, then later claimed Shed moved to a nursing home and didn't want contact with family. I'd tried to find her once in my early 20s, but my parents said Shed specifically requested no communication. It hurt, but I accepted it. Another relationship lost to circumstances beyond my control. Bernard asked me to come to his office. He had documents to share, things I needed to see. I took a personal day from work and drove to his office in Hartford, a modest suite in a building downtown. Bernard was in his 60s, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, the sort of man who radiated trustworthiness. He handed me a letter, my grandmother's handwriting, shaky but legible, dated 2 months before her death. "My dearest Yvonne," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm gone. And I can finally tell you the truth your parents kept from both of us." My hands trembled as I read. Dorothy explained that when I was born, Shed established a trust fund, $250,000, carefully saved from her late husband's life insurance and her own modest investments. The money was meant for me, for college, for starting my life, for security. My parents were designated as trustees, responsible for managing the funds until I turned 18, at which point everything would transfer to my name. I never received a single penny. Bernard slid bank statements across his desk, transaction records spanning 18 years, quarterly deposits into my parents' account, from my birth until my 18th birthday, $250,000, plus accumulated interest, transferred in regular installments. And I'd never known it existed. "Your grandmother tried to reach you," Bernard said softly. "For years, she sent letters to your home address. They were returned, marked, refused, or no longer at this address. She called, but your parents told her you didn't want to speak to her. They said you were troubled. That contact with her made things worse. Dorothy believed them because what else could she do?" I couldn't breathe. The room spun. Every memory of my childhood recontextualized in an instant. The hunger, the loneliness, the secondhand clothes, working myself to exhaustion, the student loans, all of it unnecessary, all of it a choice my parents made. "She never stopped trying," Bernard continued. "She hired investigators twice to find you, but your parents threatened legal action for harassment. She wrote you letters every birthday, every Christmas. I have them here, dozens of them, unsent because she had no way to reach you." He placed a box on the desk. I opened it with shaking hands. Letters, cards, photos. My grandmother's entire archive of love for a granddaughter she'd been cut off from. Birthday cards for ages 10 through 28, each with a handwritten message. Christmas cards with checks inside, never cashed because they never reached me. Photos of us together when I was small, me on her lap, both of us smiling. I remembered her. The visit stopped when I was 9, right around the time the trust fund finished transferring. My parents said she was sick. They said she couldn't handle visitors. They said Shed moved away. They systematically erased her from my life the moment the money ran out. "Dorothy died believing you hated her," Bernard said, his voice heavy. "I'm sorry. She wanted you to know the truth, even if it came too late." I left his office and sat in my car for an hour, unable to drive, unable to think. My entire foundation had crumbled. Every assumption about my childhood, every belief about my parents' sacrifice, every moment I'd felt guilty for wanting more. It was all built on theft and lies. I met with Bernard again 2 days later, after the initial shock wore off enough for me to function. Had done more digging, obtained financial records through legal channels that made my stomach turn. "Your parents didn't just spend the trust fund," he explained, spreading documents across the conference table. "They built a lifestyle on it." The evidence was damning. 5 years after my 18th birthday, when the last trust fund payment cleared, my parents purchased a vacation home in Clearwater Beach, Florida. Purchase price, $400,000. They'd made a down payment of $150,000 in cash. Bernard showed me photos from property records. A 3-bedroom beachfront condo with ocean views, granite countertops, a balcony overlooking the Gulf of Mexico. My parents owned a vacation home while I ate ramen noodles in my college dorm. The cars came next. Gerald drove a BMW 7 Series, midnight blue, leather interior. Diane had a Mercedes SUV, pearl white, fully loaded. Combined value, over $120,000. Both purchased outright, no financing, paid in full with cashier's checks. Then the jewelry. Diane's social media, which I rarely checked, showed her at charity galas, wearing diamond earrings, sapphire necklaces, designer gowns. Gerald posted photos from golf courses at exclusive country clubs, wearing Rolex watches that cost more than I made in 6 months. Vacation photos filled their Facebook pages. Paris, London, Rome, Barcelona. They traveled internationally twice a year, staying in 5-star hotels, eating at Michelin-starred restaurants. They posted pictures with captions like "Living our best life" and "Hard work pays off." Meanwhile, during those same years, I worked night shifts at the hospital, picked up overtime whenever possible, ate peanut butter sandwiches to save money, wore scrubs I'd bought secondhand online. I'd visited their house in Westport only a handful of times, always briefly, never invited to stay. Now I understood why. They didn't want me to see how they really lived. Bernard pulled up bank statements. The trust fund money was gone within 5 years of them receiving the final payment. They spent it on the vacation home down payment, the cars, jewelry, travel, country club memberships. After that, they leveraged those assets. They took out a mortgage on the Florida property, used the equity for more spending. Credit cards, personal loans, maintaining appearances. Are they wealthy? I asked, my voice hollow. On paper? No. They're drowning in debt. The vacation home has a $700,000 mortgage now. They've refinanced it 3 times, pulling out equity each time. Credit card debt is around $180,000. Car payments, club fees, property taxes. They're spending about $40,000 more per year than they earn. They're maintaining a facade of wealth while heading toward bankruptcy. I thought about the last time I'd seen them, 6 months earlier at a restaurant they'd chosen. Diane wore a designer dress. Gerald had on an expensive suit. They'd ordered wine that cost $60 a bottle, insisted on paying for dinner, made a show of leaving a generous tip. I'd felt guilty, like I should offer to pay, but they waved me off. "We're doing well," Gerald had said. "Let us treat you." It was all performance. Every bit of it. "What can I do?" I asked Bernard. "You can sue," he said, "for breach of fiduciary duty, fraud, conversion of funds. The trust was established for your benefit. They violated that trust legally and morally. You're entitled to recover the funds, plus interest, plus damages for emotional distress. Will I win? The evidence is overwhelming. The question isn't whether you'll win, it's whether they have anything left to take." I authorized him to build the case. We spent the next month gathering every document, every receipt, every piece of evidence. Bernard was thorough, methodical, building an airtight argument. But before filing, I needed to try one more thing. I needed to look them in the eye and give them a chance to do the right thing. I drove to their house in Westport on a Saturday afternoon, unannounced. The house was impressive from the outside, a colonial-style home in a neighborhood where lawns looked manicured and driveways held luxury cars. It always felt out of place here, like I didn't belong in their world. Now I knew why. Their world was built on money that should have been mine. Diane answered the door in athleisure wear that probably cost $300, her nails freshly manicured, her hair professionally styled. She looked surprised to see me. "Yvonne, what are you doing here? We need to talk," I said, walking past her into the house. The interior matched the exterior. Marble floors, designer furniture, original artwork on the walls, a grand piano in the living room that no one played, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a professionally landscaped backyard. This was the home they built while I struggled. Gerald appeared from his study, reading glasses perched on his nose. "This is unexpected. Is everything all right?" I sat on their expensive couch without being invited. I know about the trust fund. The temperature in the room dropped. Diane's face went pale, then flushed red. Gerald's expression hardened, calculation flickering behind his eyes. I don't know what you're talking about, Diane said, but her voice wavered. I pulled out copies of the bank statements, the trust documents. Everything Bernard had given me. I spread them across their glass coffee table. Grandmother Dorothy left me $250,000. You were supposed to manage it until I turned 18, then give it to me. You spent every penny on yourselves. Gerald moved first, sitting in the armchair across from me. His face was calm now. Too calm. That money was used for your benefit. Raising a child is expensive, Yvonne. Do you have any idea what it costs to feed you, clothe you, keep a roof over your head? You left me alone for days at a time. Mrs. Patterson fed me more than you did. I bought my own clothes with money from my job. What exactly did you spend on me? Diane sat next to Gerald, her hand on his arm. They were unified. A team. Private tutoring, she said. Medical bills. School activities. Dance lessons. Soccer camps. All the things you don't remember because you were young. I never had tutoring. I never went to dance lessons or soccer camps. You never signed me up for anything. Try again. Gerald's jaw tightened. You're being disrespectful. We provided for you. That trust fund was payment for the years we dedicated to raising you. Your grandmother didn't understand the sacrifices parents make. I pulled out more documents, the ones showing the Florida vacation home, the luxury cars, the country club memberships. These are the sacrifices? Beach vacations and BMWs while I worked 2 jobs to afford textbooks. Diane stood abruptly. Your grandmother was a bitter, manipulative woman who tried to control our lives. That money was compensation for dealing with her interference. We protected you from her toxicity. You told her I didn't want to see her. You returned her letters. You kept us apart so she wouldn't find out you were stealing from me. We weren't stealing, Gerald said, his voice cold now. We were managing assets. The trust gave us discretion on how to use those funds. We used them to maintain a stable home environment. Stable? I was alone all the time. I thought we were poor. You let me take out student loans while you vacationed in Europe. Diane's face twisted with anger. How dare you come into our home and accuse us? We gave you life. We could have given you up for adoption, but we didn't. You owe us gratitude, not this entitled attitude. The words hit like a slap. All the years I'd made excuses for them, convinced myself they loved me in their own way, tried to understand their distance, and this was the truth underneath. I was a burden they'd kept out of obligation, not love. If I pursue this legally, I said quietly, what will you do? Gerald leaned forward. If you take legal action against us, we will cut you out of our lives permanently. You'll have no family, no parents, no inheritance, nothing. Is that what you want? To destroy your family over money? I stood, gathering the documents. You destroyed this family a long time ago. As I turned to leave, something caught my eye. A framed photo on the mantel, recent by the look of it. My parents stood with a young girl, maybe 12 or 13, all of them smiling at a beach. The girl had dark hair, olive skin, a bright smile. She wore a necklace that looked expensive. Who's that? I asked. Diane followed my gaze. Her expression shifted, became guarded. That's Sophia. Our goddaughter. Goddaughter. Gerald stood. We've been helping support her education. Her family situation is complicated. We've taken her under our wing. Something about the way he said it felt wrong. How long have you been supporting her? 5 years, Diane said. She needed guidance, stability. We've been able to provide that. They were playing happy family with someone else's child, giving another little girl what they'd denied me. Or were they? Something in their body language, the way they glanced at each other, suggested more to this story. Sophia is grateful, Gerald added, his voice pointed. She appreciates what we do for her. She doesn't throw accusations or make demands. She understands family loyalty. The comparison was deliberate, meant to wound. It worked. I left without another word, drove home in a daze. That night, I told Marcus everything. He held me while I cried, rage and grief mixing into something I couldn't name. "File the lawsuit," he said. "Make them pay. They don't have the money to pay. Bernard said they're drowning in debt, then make them lose everything. They deserve it." Maybe he was right. Maybe justice mattered more than restitution. Bernard filed the lawsuit 3 weeks later. The complaint was 32 pages of detailed allegations, bank records, trust documents, and legal arguments. We sued for breach of fiduciary duty, fraud, conversion, and emotional distress. The total demand? $575,000. That included the original trust amount, accumulated interest, and damages for the years of lies and neglect. My parents had 10 days to respond. On day 8, I received a thick envelope via certified mail. Not from them, but from their attorney, a lawyer named Richard Huntington from a firm in Stamford. Inside was a cease and desist letter, 3 pages of legal threats accusing me of defamation, harassment, and attempting to extort my parents. They claimed I was spreading malicious lies about them to family members and trying to damage their reputation. The letter threatened criminal charges if I continued my campaign of slander. There was no mention of the wedding invitation I'd sent, no acknowledgement that I'd reached out as their daughter, hoping for reconciliation. Just legal threats and denials. "This is a scare tactic," Bernard said when I showed him. "They're trying to intimidate you into dropping the case. It won't work. Everything we've alleged is documented fact. Truth is an absolute defense to defamation." But it shook me. The idea that my parents would rather attack me than admit wrongdoing felt like a final betrayal. Marcus was furious, wanted to drive to their house and confront them himself. I stopped him. This had to be handled properly, legally, without giving them ammunition. The next month was consumed by legal proceedings, depositions, document requests, interrogatories. Bernard was relentless, and my parents' lawyer seemed overwhelmed by the volume of evidence. Every bank statement, every trust document, every piece of correspondence from Dorothy supported our case. Meanwhile, life continued. I worked my shifts at the hospital, came home exhausted, planned a wedding that felt increasingly surreal. Marcus and I had set a date 6 months out, a small ceremony at his parents' house, 50 guests, mostly his family and our close friends. I'd sent my parents an invitation before everything exploded, back when I still held hope they might change. Marcus' family was everything mine wasn't. His mother, Patricia, was warm and welcoming. His father, Robert, told terrible dad jokes and helped Marcus fix things around our apartment. His younger sister, Emily, had already claimed the role of maid of honor. They'd embraced me completely, never asking about my family situation beyond what I volunteered. Patricia encouraged me to invite my parents despite everything. "Family is complicated," she said one evening while we addressed wedding invitations. "Maybe seeing you happy, getting married, will soften their hearts. People can change." I wanted to believe her. Part of me, the part that was still that lonely little girl waiting on the porch steps, wanted my parents at my wedding, wanted them to see me in a white dress, to walk me down the aisle, to dance with me. Wanted them to be proud, to apologize, to finally show up. So I sent a second invitation. This one included a handwritten letter. "Mom and Dad," I wrote, "I'm getting married. I'd like you there. I know things are difficult right now, and there's a lot of hurt between us. But you're still my parents, and this is one of the most important days of my life. If you can find it in yourselves to acknowledge what happened, to take responsibility for the pain you caused, I'm willing to work toward forgiveness. I don't want to spend my wedding day grieving the parents I wish I had. I want to celebrate with the parents who are willing to change. Please come. Please let this be a new beginning. Love, Yvonne." I mailed it with genuine hope, stupid as that sounds. 2 weeks passed with no response. Then, on a Tuesday morning, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Hello, Yvonne." A young voice, female, tentative. "My name is Sophia. I think I need to talk to you about your parents." My heart stopped. Sophia? The goddaughter. That's what they tell people, but it's not true. "Can we meet?" "There are things you need to know." We agreed to meet at a coffee shop in New Haven, halfway between us. I drove there the next day, my mind racing with possibilities. Sophia was waiting when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth. She was older than Shed looked in the photo, maybe 15, with an air of maturity that came from hardship. "Thank you for meeting me," she said as I sat down. "I wasn't sure you'd come. How did you find me?" "Social media. I've known about you for a while. Your parents don't talk about you much, but I found old photos, your Facebook profile. I've wanted to reach out for months." "Why now?" Sophia took a deep breath. "Because I just found out they've been lying to me the same way they lied to you. And I think if we work together, we can stop them from hurting anyone else." She pulled out a folder, much like the one Id carried into my parents' house. Inside were documents, bank statements, legal papers. "I'm not their goddaughter," Sophia said. "I'm their granddaughter." The world tilted. "What?" "My father was Trevor. He was your mother's son from before she married your dad. She gave him up for adoption when she was 17. He found them 5 years ago, right after my mom died. He wanted to reconnect, to let them know their grandchild. They seemed excited at first. I never knew my mother had another child. She doesn't talk about it. Apparently it was a huge secret, something that caused problems when she married your dad. But when Trevor showed up, they acted like they wanted to make amends. They spent time with us, took us to dinners, seemed genuinely interested in building a relationship. What happened?" Sophia's eyes filled with tears. 6 months after reconnecting, my dad died in a car accident. Drunk driver hit him on his way home from work. Had just taken out a life insurance policy. $300,000. He named me as the beneficiary, with your parents as trustees until I turned 18. The pattern clicked into place. Another trust fund, another vulnerable child. "They took me in after he died," Sophia continued. "Said they wanted to honor his memory by raising me, giving me stability. I was 10 years old, grieving, alone. I thought I was lucky to have them. Let me guess. They're spending your money." She nodded. "I turn 15 next month." I started asking questions about the trust fund, about college planning. They got defensive, said the money was being used for my care. But I don't see it. I wear thrift store clothes. I make my own meals. They leave me alone for days at a time while they travel. I found bank statements in your dad's office last week. The life insurance money is almost gone. They've spent it on themselves, just like they did with yours. I felt sick. History repeating itself. Another girl suffering the same neglect and exploitation. "I'm so sorry," I said. "We're going to fix this." "There's more," Sophia said. "I found emails between your parents and their lawyer. They're planning to fight your lawsuit by claiming you're mentally unstable, that you're making false allegations because you're jealous of their success. They're going to try to destroy your credibility in court." The betrayal shouldn't have surprised me anymore, but it did. They weren't just defending themselves. They were going on the offensive. "We need to tell my lawyer about this," I said. "Will you testify?" Sophia straightened her shoulders. "Yes, I want them stopped. I don't want them to do this to anyone else." I called Bernard from the parking lot, explained everything. He listened without interrupting, then said, "Bring her to my office tomorrow. We're amending the complaint." Bernard's office became our war room. Over the next 2 weeks, he interviewed Sophia extensively, gathered her documents, contacted Child Protective Services about her living situation. The pattern of abuse was undeniable. 2 children, 2 trust funds, identical tactics spanning nearly 3 decades. The amended complaint was devastating. It laid out both cases side by side, showed the systematic exploitation, the emotional manipulation, the financial fraud. Bernard argued that my parents had engaged in a continuing pattern of fiduciary abuse, that Sophia's case proved my allegations weren't isolated incidents but deliberate criminal behavior. Child Protective Services opened an investigation. A social worker visited my parents' house, interviewed Sophia, reviewed the financial records. The report confirmed what we suspected. Sophia was being neglected, the trust fund was being misappropriated, and my parents were unfit guardians. Meanwhile, discovery in my lawsuit revealed more damaging evidence. Gerald and Diane's financial situation was dire. The vacation home was in pre-foreclosure. Credit card companies were threatening lawsuits. They'd borrowed against Gerald's retirement account, taken out a home equity line of credit, and were still bleeding money every month. Their lawyer, Huntington, tried to negotiate a settlement. He called Bernard with an offer. They'd acknowledge mismanagement of the trust fund, agree to make payments over time, and I'd drop the lawsuit. No admission of fraud, no punitive damages, just a structured payment plan. What can they actually pay? I asked Bernard. Maybe $20,000 total, spread over 10 years. It's insulting. I rejected the offer. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about accountability. The court date was set for 3 months away. In the meantime, Marcus and I continued wedding planning. The ceremony would take place 2 months after the trial, assuming I could emotionally handle both events in such close succession. Patricia remained optimistic that my parents would come around. When they see you're serious, when they realize they might lose you forever, they'll change, she insisted. I didn't have the heart to tell her that ship had sailed. Marcus was less forgiving. They've shown you who they are, he said one night as we lay in bed. Believe them. Stop hoping they'll suddenly become different people. He was right, but hope is a stubborn thing. 2 weeks before the trial, I made a decision. I would send my parents one final olive branch, one last chance to do the right thing. I drafted a letter, spent hours getting the words right. Mom and Dad, it read. In 2 weeks, we'll be in court. A judge will hear evidence about what you did, how you spent money meant for me, how you're doing the same thing to Sophia. You'll lose. The evidence is overwhelming. But it doesn't have to be this way. If you're willing to take responsibility, to admit what you did and why, to make amends not just financially but emotionally, I'll consider dropping the lawsuit, not because you deserve mercy, but because I deserve peace. I'm getting married in 4 months. I'd like my parents there. Not the people you've been pretending to be, but your real selves, flawed and accountable. The choice is yours. This is the last chance I'm offering. I didn't mail it. Instead, I had it delivered by courier, requiring a signature. I wanted proof they received it. 3 days later, my phone rang. Deanne's number. Hello, I answered, my heart pounding. You think you're so smart, Diane said, her voice venomous. You think you've won, but you have no idea what you've started. I'm giving you a chance to make this right. Make it right? You've destroyed us. The bank is foreclosing on our home. Credit card companies are suing us. Child Services is trying to take Sophia away. All because you couldn't leave well enough alone. You did this to yourselves. I'm just holding you accountable. We gave you life, she hissed. We could have aborted you, but we didn't. We sacrificed our youth, our dreams, our money to raise you. And this is how you repay us. The words were meant to hurt, and they did. But beneath the pain was clarity. These people had never loved me. I was an obligation they resented, a burden they'd monetized. See you in court, I said, and hung up. Marcus found me crying on the bathroom floor an hour later. He didn't say anything, just held me while I grieved the parents I'd never actually had. The courthouse in Hartford was imposing, all stone columns and marble floors. Marcus came with me, holding my hand as we walked through security. Sophia was there with her court-appointed advocate, a stern woman named Linda who'd been fighting for Sophia's removal from my parents' custody. Bernard met us in the hallway outside the courtroom. They're already inside with Huntington. They look nervous. Good. My parents sat at the defendant's table, both dressed impeccably. Diane wore a navy suit that probably cost $1,000. Gerald had on a charcoal gray suit with a silk tie. They looked like successful professionals, not con artists who'd stolen from their own family. They didn't look at me as I entered, didn't acknowledge my presence at all. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Margaret Thornton, called the court to order. She'd reviewed all the filings, read the evidence, and her expression suggested she'd already formed an opinion. Bernard presented our case methodically. He started with Dorothy's trust documents, showed the clear language establishing the funds for my benefit. Then came the bank statements, showing every transfer from the trust to my parents' account. Then the evidence of how they'd spent it. Property records for the Florida vacation home, vehicle registrations for the luxury cars, credit card statements showing designer purchases, and five-star hotels. He called me to the stand first. I'd prepared for this, practiced with Bernard, but nothing could have prepared me for the reality of sitting in a witness box, raising my right hand, swearing to tell the truth. Bernard walked me through my childhood. I described the loneliness, the hunger, the nights spent alone, the second-hand clothes, the way Mrs. Patterson became more of a parent than my own. I talked about working through high school and college, the student loans, the belief that my parents were struggling financially. "When did you learn about the trust fund?" Bernard asked. 3 months ago, when Mr. Fletcher contacted me after my grandmother passed away." "How did that make you feel?" Huntington objected. "Relevance." Judge Thornton overruled him. "I'll allow it. Answer the question." I looked directly at my parents. Betrayed. Every moment of my childhood was a lie. They had money meant for me, money that could have changed my life, and they spent it on luxuries while I struggled. They let me believe we were poor, let me feel guilty for needing things, let me work myself to exhaustion, and they did it deliberately, knowingly, for years. "No further questions," Bernard said. Huntington approached for cross-examination. He was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with perfectly styled hair and an expensive suit. "Miss Yvonne," he began, "isn't it true that your parents provided you with food, shelter, and clothing throughout your childhood?" "Barely. But they did provide those things. The legal minimum, yes. And they never abused you physically. Neglect is abuse. Please answer the question, yes or no. Did they hit you, burn you, or cause you physical harm?" "No. So they fulfilled their basic obligations as parents. And now you're suing them for hundreds of thousands of dollars because you feel they didn't do enough." Bernard stood. "Objection. Argumentative and mischaracterizes the testimony." "Sustained," Judge Thornton said. "Mr. Huntington, ask questions, don't make speeches." But the damage was done. Huntington was trying to paint me as entitled, greedy, vindictive. He continued. "You claim your parents spent trust fund money on themselves. But isn't it possible they used that money for household expenses that benefited you? The money went to a vacation home I've never visited, cars I've never driven, and trips I was never invited on. None of that benefited me. But running a household is expensive. Perhaps they commingled funds, used trust money for general expenses that included your care. The trust documents required separate accounting. They violated that requirement." Huntington looked frustrated. He tried a few more angles, but I held firm. Bernard had prepared me well. Next, Bernard called Sophia. She was nervous, her hands shaking as she took the stand. But her testimony was powerful. She described her father's death, how Gerald and Diane had taken her in, promised to care for her. Then she detailed the reality. Being left alone, making her own meals, wearing clothes from Goodwill while her guardians traveled to Europe. "They told me the trust fund money was being used for my care," Sophia said, her voice steady despite her tears. "But I found the bank statements. They spent it on themselves, just like they did with Yvonne. I'm not a person to them. I'm just a source of money." Huntington didn't cross-examine her. What could he say? She was 15, orphaned, exploited. Any attack on her would make his clients look worse. Bernard called a forensic accountant who'd reviewed all the financial records. His testimony was technical but damning. "In my professional opinion," he concluded, "the defendants engaged in systematic misappropriation of trust funds. None of the expenditures benefited the beneficiaries. All of it was personal spending for the trustees' benefit." Finally, Bernard rested our case. Now it was Huntington's turn to present a defense. He called Gerald to the stand. My father took the oath, sat down, and looked at the judge with what he probably thought was sincerity. "Mr. Gerald," Huntington began, "can you explain your understanding of the trust fund established by Dorothy?" "We were given discretion to manage those funds for Yvonne's benefit. We interpreted that broadly to include maintaining a stable household environment." "And how did you use the funds?" "For mortgage payments, utilities, food, clothing, medical expenses. The costs of raising a child are substantial. The trust helped us provide Yvonne with a middle-class upbringing." It was a bold lie, easily disprovable. Bernard had the bank records showing exactly where the money went. What about the vacation home in Florida? Huntington asked. We purchased that as an investment and family retreat. We intended for Yvonne to use it, to have vacations there. She chose not to. Because I was never invited, I said aloud, unable to stop myself. Judge Thornton looked at me. Miss, please refrain from speaking out of turn. I nodded, biting my tongue. The testimony continued, Gerald spinning a narrative that made them sound like devoted parents who'd made difficult financial decisions. It might have been convincing if not for the mountain of evidence proving otherwise. Diane testified next, tears streaming down her face as she described the sacrifices they'd made. We gave up so much for Yvonne, she said. Career opportunities, personal dreams, our youth. We poured everything into raising her, and now she's accusing us of theft because we tried to maintain some quality of life for ourselves. Bernard's cross-examination was surgical. Mrs. Diane, you testified that you used trust funds for Yvonne's benefit. Can you explain how a beachfront vacation home she never visited benefited her? We intended for her to use it as a family retreat. Did you ever invite her to Florida? Diane hesitated. We discussed it. That's not what I asked. Did you ever specifically invite her to stay at the vacation home? I don't recall specific conversations. Bernard pulled out phone records, emails, everything. In fact, there's no record of any invitation. No emails, no text messages, no calls discussing family vacations. Isn't it true that you and your husband used that property exclusively for yourselves? She was welcome anytime, but never invited. How would she know she was welcome? Diane had no answer. Bernard moved on to the luxury cars, the jewelry, the European vacations. For each item, he made Diane admit that Yvonne had never benefited from it, never been included, never been considered. By the time cross-examination ended, Diane was no longer crying. She looked angry, cornered, exposed. Huntington tried to rehabilitate his clients with closing arguments about parental rights and the difficulties of raising children. But Judge Thornton's expression suggested she wasn't buying it. I'll take this matter under advisement, she said. I'll issue a written ruling within 2 weeks. Court is adjourned. We filed out of the courtroom. My parents left through a side door, avoiding us entirely. In the hallway, Linda, Sophia's advocate, approached us. The judge has already indicated she'll be removing Sophia from their custody, Linda said. We've identified a maternal aunt who's willing to take her in. Carol lives in Massachusetts, stable home, good job. Sophia will be safe. Sophia looked relieved and terrified at the same time. Change, even good change, is scary. Can I stay in touch with you? She asked me. Of course, I said, pulling her into a hug. We're family now. The real kind. Judge Thornton's ruling came exactly 2 weeks later, delivered via email from Bernard. I was at work when the notification came through, in the middle of my shift at the hospital. I ducked into a supply closet to read it, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. The ruling was 23 pages long. Judge Thornton had left nothing ambiguous. This court finds the defendants, Gerald and Diane, engaged in systematic, deliberate, and fraudulent misappropriation of trust funds, she wrote. The evidence overwhelmingly demonstrates that funds meant for the plaintiff's benefit were diverted for the defendant's personal enrichment. This was not mere mismanagement or poor judgment. This was theft, plain and simple, committed against their own child, and later against their grandchild. She awarded me the full amount, $575,000, plus legal fees. She issued a similar judgment in Sophia's case, ordering restitution of $300,000 plus damages. Then came the part that gave me chills. The defendant's conduct reveals a pattern of exploitation that spans decades and crosses generational lines. They viewed vulnerable children not as individuals deserving care and protection, but as financial resources to be exploited. Their complete lack of remorse, evident throughout these proceedings, demonstrates they remain a danger to any child placed in their care. She ordered the immediate sale of all their assets, the Westport house, the Florida vacation home, the vehicles, everything. The proceeds would be split between Sophia and me according to our respective judgments. She placed liens on any future earnings or assets they might acquire. In the section addressing Sophia's guardianship, Judge Thornton permanently terminated my parents' custody rights and authorized her placement with her Aunt Carol. She also mandated that my parents have no contact with Sophia unless she specifically requests it once she turns 18. The final paragraph struck at the heart of everything. Parents are entrusted with the sacred duty of nurturing, protecting, and preparing their children for life. The defendants violated that trust in every conceivable way. They exploited their daughter's love and loyalty, manipulated her grandmother's generosity, and then repeated the pattern with their granddaughter. This court hopes that justice, though late, will provide some measure of healing for the victims of their greed. I stood in that supply closet reading and rereading the ruling, tears streaming down my face. A nurse knocked, asking if I was okay. I wasn't, but I would be. Marcus took the rest of the day off work to be with me. We sat in our small apartment, the ruling pulled up on his laptop, processing what it meant. "You won," he said. "Completely. I know. So, why don't you look happy?" I struggled to articulate it. Because winning means acknowledging I lost something bigger. I lost the fantasy that my parents might change, that they might suddenly become the people I needed them to be. This is final. There's no going back from this. He pulled me close. You're not losing anything that was real. You're just letting go of what you wished was real. That's different. He was right. But grief doesn't follow logic. The practical matters moved quickly. A court-appointed trustee took control of my parents' assets. The houses went on the market immediately. The cars were sold at auction. Bank accounts were frozen and redirected. My parents tried to fight the asset seizure, filed emergency motions claiming they needed their home, their vehicles, money to live on. Judge Thornton denied every motion. The defendants created their own financial crisis through years of fraudulent spending, she wrote in one denial. This court will not prioritize their comfort over the restitution owed to their victims. I heard through Bernard that they'd moved into a small apartment in Bridgeport, both working retail jobs to cover basic expenses. They'd lost everything: their house, their cars, their country club memberships, their wealthy friends who'd only been interested in their facade. Part of me felt satisfaction. They were finally experiencing the consequences of their choices, living the life they'd forced on me. But another part felt hollow. This wasn't the victory I'd wanted when I was a little girl waiting for them to come home. Sophia moved in with her Aunt Carol, a woman in her late 30s who worked as a teacher and lived in a modest house in Worcester. Carol called me a week after the transition to say Sophia was adjusting well. "She's a remarkable kid," Carol said. "Smart, resilient, surprisingly optimistic given everything she's been through. You probably saved her life, you know. Another few years with Gerald and Diane, and who knows what would have happened." I visited Sophia the following weekend. Carol's house was nothing fancy, but it was warm. Photos on the walls, books on shelves, the smell of something baking in the kitchen. Sophia looked different already, more relaxed, younger somehow. "How are you?" I asked as we sat in her new bedroom, decorated with posters she'd chosen herself. "Weird," she admitted. "Good weird." Carol actually asks about my day. She makes breakfast. She doesn't disappear for days. It's taking some getting used to. I know the feeling. Marcus' family is like that. It's disorienting when people actually care. "Do you think they'll ever apologize?" Sophia asked. "Gerald and Diane." I thought about it. No. I don't think they're capable of seeing what they did wrong. In their minds, we're the villains for exposing them. That's sad. It is. But it's not our responsibility to fix them. We spent the afternoon talking, sharing our experiences, finding comfort in having someone who understood. Sophia showed me her room, her new school schedule, the debate club she'd joined. Carol made dinner, insisted I stay, and for a few hours, I experienced what family could be like when it was built on genuine care, rather than obligation. Driving home that evening, I felt something shift. The grief wasn't gone, but it was changing shape, becoming something I could carry without it crushing me. My wedding day arrived on a perfect Saturday in October. The air was crisp, the leaves were changing colors, and Marcus' parents' backyard looked like something from a magazine. Patricia had spent weeks stringing lights, arranging flowers, setting up chairs and tables. She'd thrown herself into planning with the enthusiasm of a woman who'd always wanted a daughter. I got ready in Marcus' childhood bedroom, surrounded by Emily and my friends from the hospital. My dress was simple, ivory-colored, nothing extravagant. I'd bought it on sale and felt beautiful in it. "Are you nervous?" Emily asked as she helped with my veil. "Not about marrying Marcus," I said. "Just about everything else." My parents hadn't responded to the wedding invitation. I'd sent it anyway. One final gesture, knowing they wouldn't come but needing to prove to myself that I'd tried everything. The silence was its own answer. 50 guests filled the backyard when I walked down the makeshift aisle. Marcus stood under an arch decorated with autumn flowers, his face lighting up when he saw me. His father, Robert, walked me down the aisle since I had no father to do it. He squeezed my hand before handing me over to Marcus, whispered, "We're proud to call you our daughter." The ceremony was brief, personal. Marcus and I had written our own vows. When it was my turn, I looked at him and spoke from my heart. "Marcus, you've shown me what love actually looks like. Not the obligation I grew up thinking was love, but the real thing. You show up. You support me. You celebrate my wins and mourn my losses. You've never kept receipts for your kindness or made me feel like a burden. You've given me a family through your family, and you've helped me understand that I'm worthy of genuine care. I promise to love you the same way, to be your partner in building something better than either of us had before." His vows echoed mine, promising to be the stability I'd never had, to build a home where love was shown through actions, not just words. When we kissed, the crowd cheered. I looked out at the faces watching us, Patricia and Robert beaming, Emily crying happy tears, my friends from work whistling and clapping, Bernard and his wife smiling, Mrs. Patterson dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. And there, in the back row, was Sophia. She wore a dress I'd bought her, pale blue, age-appropriate and pretty. Carol sat beside her, one arm around her shoulders. Sophia caught my eye and grinned, giving me 2 thumbs up. These were my people. This was my family. Not defined by blood but by choice, by showing up, by genuine care. The reception was joyful. We danced, ate patricius, incredible cooking, listened to embarrassing speeches from Marcus' college friends. As the sun set and the string lights came on, I found myself standing at the edge of the yard, watching everyone mingle and laugh. Mrs. Patterson found me there. She was 80 now, moving slower but still sharp as ever. "Your grandmother would be so proud," she said, taking my hand. "Dorothy, I mean. I knew her. You know, back before your parents cut everyone off. She talked about you constantly, worried about you. She tried so hard to reach you. I wish I'd known," I said. "I wish she'd known I didn't hate her." "She knew, honey. In the end, she knew. That's why she left you those letters, that money, that lawyer. She made sure the truth would come out eventually. She gave you the tools to escape." I hadn't thought of it that way. Dorothy's final act was giving me the evidence I needed to break free, to stop the cycle, to save Sophia. She couldn't save me herself, but she made sure I could save myself. "Thank you," I said to Mrs. Patterson, "for feeding me, for being there, for being more of a parent than they ever were." She hugged me tight. "You were never a burden, Yvonne. You were a joy. I just wish I'd known what was really happening, that I could have done more. You did enough. You showed me what kindness looked like." The evening wound down. Guests left, hugging us, congratulating us, promising to visit soon. Sophia and Carol were among the last to leave. "Can I come visit during Thanksgiving break?" Sophia asked. "You better," I said. "Well, make it a tradition. You, me, Marcus, and Carol. A real family Thanksgiving." She hugged me fiercely. "Thank you for not giving up. On yourself or on me." Watching them drive away, I felt Marcus' arms wrap around me from behind. "Good day," he asked. "The best. Any regrets?" I thought about my parents, about the empty seats where they should have been, about the relationship we'd never have. Did I regret trying to hold them accountable? Did I regret filing the lawsuit, destroying their comfortable life, forcing them to face consequences? "No," I said. "No regrets." 6 months after the wedding, the house sales finalized. After paying off mortgages, legal fees, and liens, I received $68,000. Sophia received a similar amount, held in a trust managed by Carol and supervised by the court. It wasn't the full amount I was owed. It wasn't even close. But it was enough to matter. I used the money to pay off my student loans completely. Every single penny of debt, gone. The freedom that came with that, the ability to build a life without that weight, was worth more than any larger sum. The rest went into savings, a nest egg for the future Marcus and I were building. Wed talked about kids someday, about buying a house, about creating the kind of family neither of us had growing up. I never heard directly from my parents again. No apology, no acknowledgement, no attempt at reconciliation. Through the social media grapevine, I learned they were both working, living modestly, keeping a low profile. Gerald apparently told people I was a disturbed individual who'd fabricated lies to extort them. Diane said I was mentally ill, that they were the real victims. Let them believe that if it helped them sleep at night. I knew the truth, and so did everyone who mattered. One evening, about a year after the wedding, Marcus found me looking at the box of letters Dorothy had left me. I'd finally worked up the courage to read them all. Every birthday card, every Christmas wish, every expression of love she'd written to a granddaughter she couldn't reach. "You okay?" Marcus asked, sitting beside me. "I was just thinking about what she wrote in the last letter," she said. "I hope someday you'll understand that real family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about showing up, about sacrifice, about choosing someone every day even when it's hard. I chose you from the day you were born, and even though circumstances kept us apart, that choice never changed." "She was right," Marcus said. "She was. And I learned it. The people who gave birth to me didn't teach me about love or family or sacrifice. Everyone else did. Mrs. Patterson making me dinner when my parents didn't. You and your family welcoming me completely. Bernard fighting for me without knowing me. Carol taking in Sophia. Dorothy leaving me those letters and that evidence. All of you showed me what family actually means." "What does it mean?" he asked, though I knew he already knew the answer. "It means showing up. It means choosing someone not because you have to, but because you want to. It means putting someone's needs alongside your own, not above and not below. It means being honest, even when it's uncomfortable. It means celebrating the good and supporting through the bad. It means never keeping score." Marcus kissed my forehead. "And you've become that for Sophia." He was right. Sophia and I talked every week, visited regularly, had built a relationship that looked nothing like what I'd had with my parents. I showed up for her school events, celebrated her achievements, listened when she struggled. I was becoming the person I'd needed when I was her age. Breaking the cycle. That's what this had all been about. I put the letters back in their box, placed them on the shelf. I didn't need to reread them anymore. It absorbed their lessons. That night, I dreamed about Dorothy. We were sitting in her kitchen, which I remembered vaguely from childhood. She was baking cookies, and the smell filled the whole house. "You did good, sweetheart," she said in the dream. "I'm proud of you. I'm sorry I never got to say goodbye." I told her. "You're saying it now, and you're living the life I wanted for you. That's goodbye enough." I woke up crying. But they were healing tears. The grief was becoming something I could hold without it defining me. Life moved forward. I got promoted at the hospital. Marcus got tenure at his school. We adopted a rescue dog named Charlie who'd been neglected by his previous owners and needed someone to show him what love looked like. The parallels weren't lost on me. Sophia thrived. She graduated high school with honors, got into a good college with scholarships and the money from her trust fund. She talked about becoming a social worker, helping kids in situations like ours, turning pain into purpose. 3 years after the wedding, Marcus and I had a daughter. We named her Dorothy. I held her in the hospital, looked at her tiny, perfect face, and made a promise. I would show up. I would sacrifice. I would choose her every single day. She would never wonder if she was wanted, never feel like a burden, never question whether she deserved love. Breaking cycles isn't easy. It requires consciousness, effort, constant vigilance against falling into familiar patterns. But it's possible. I was living proof. Sometimes I thought about my parents, wondered if they ever reflected on what they'd lost. Did they regret their choices? Did they miss me? Did they care that they had a granddaughter they'd never meet? I didn't know, and increasingly, I didn't need to know. Their story was theirs to write. Mine was separate now. I learned that the people who give you life aren't always the ones who teach you how to live it. Real family shows up. They sacrifice for you not because they have to, but because they want to. They celebrate your victories and support you through defeats. They don't keep receipts for their love or make you feel guilty for existing. My parents taught me what love isn't. Everyone else taught me what it is. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't forgive. It's walk away and build something better. I sent my parents a wedding invitation, hoping they'd changed. Instead, they got legal papers that changed everything. The revenge wasn't in the money or the judgment. It was in realizing I never needed them to be whole. I already was. The cracks they created, other people helped me fill with gold. I became more beautiful for having been broken and repaired. Dorothy's trust fund, intended to give me a better start in life, ended up doing exactly that. Just not in the way Shed planned. It gave me the truth, the evidence, the ability to save myself and Sophia. It gave me justice, and, eventually, peace. I built a family based on choice, on showing up, on genuine care. I became the parent I never had, the friend I needed, the person who breaks cycles instead of perpetuating them. And that, I realized, was the sweetest revenge of all. Not destroying them, but becoming someone they could never be, capable of real love, genuine sacrifice, and unconditional care. They got legal papers demanding payment. What they really received was proof that their daughter had become stronger than their neglect, wiser than their lies, and more successful at family than they ever were. I won, not because of the lawsuit, but because I learned to build something they never could, a life filled with people who actually show up. So if you're facing a similar situation, if you're questioning whether to hold people accountable or let things go for the sake of keeping peace, here's what I learned. Sometimes peace comes not from avoiding conflict but from demanding truth. Sometimes family means walking away from biology and choosing people who choose you back. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to accept less than you deserve. And sometimes revenge isn't about hurting someone. It's about healing yourself. Now let me ask you something, and I really want to know your thoughts. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice between keeping peace with family and demanding accountability? How did you handle it? And do you have any regrets about your decision? Share your story in the comments because I truly believe we heal together by sharing our experiences. And if this story resonated with you, if it made you feel something or think differently about family and forgiveness, please hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories about real people navigating difficult situations and finding their way to healing. Share this with someone who might need to hear it, someone who's struggling with similar family dynamics and needs to know they're not alone. Your support means everything and helps these stories reach people who need them most. Thank you for listening to my story, for being part of this community, and for believing that we all deserve love that shows up. I hope you find your own version of family, the kind that chooses you every single day. Take care of yourselves, and remember, you're worthy of real love, not just the performance of it.